Hello everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name's Alana, I really like books, and today we are doing my 2025 reading ranking. Thanks to the 5 a.m. book club, I read over 100 books in 2025, which is a personal record for me. And even though we are in the middle of January now, I thought it would be good to kind of do some reflecting, look back at everything I read, and rank how I'm feeling about them now that the year is over, which is sometimes very different from how I rated and ranked them when I first finished the book. So if you and I have similar reading taste, or you're just interested in seeing whether or not some of these books are worth putting on your TBR, then get yourself a beverage or a snack and let's dive right in. Let me start by explaining the ranking system. We have 5 categories going from most loved to least loved. At the very top, we have my Mount Rushmore. This is the internal shrine I create for books in my head. Stories that I absolutely love, worlds that I never want to leave, characters that I can't stop thinking about, narratives that change my perspective on life and literature. They go on my book Mount Rushmore. These are the 5-star and 6-star reads. Just underneath that, we have I Love You. I loved this book. I had a great time. It's maybe a story that stuck with me, but maybe didn't sink into my DNA, but an absolutely fabulous time. Would definitely recommend that you read as well. Under that, we have Not Mad. I'm not mad I spent time reading this book. It was enjoyable, it was lighthearted perhaps, it was not the worst book I've ever read. I might recommend it to a certain reader. I liked it, but I didn't necessarily love it. Just under that, we have a soft pass. This category of books goes for books that I liked enough to finish, but wouldn't necessarily recommend if you and I have the same taste in reading. That being said, there's a lid for every pot and there's a book for every reader. So books in the soft pass category, I might still recommend to people, but maybe just for a very specific goal or a very specific taste. One that was not mine. And then lastly, we have regrets and mistakes. This category is for books that I low-key regret finishing only because it wasted my time, but it's very rare of me to DNF a book because if I want to properly, thoroughly critique or hate on something, I want to make sure that I have all the information humanly possible to do so. So sometimes these are books that I finished out of spite, sometimes these are books I finished because I had to for book club, etc. Books I'd probably recommend you pass on. So let's dive in. We are gonna go in chronological order of the books read. So starting with my very first read of the year, we have Over the Influence by JoJo. I know some people don't believe in rating memoirs. I don't personally see the harm in it. It's not like you're critiquing the events of a person's life, but more how they put that together in a meaningful narrative. And for me, I love JoJo and I really enjoyed this book. I'm gonna put it in Not Mad. It was a great way to spend the first few days of 2025. My second book of the year is The 5-Star Weekend by Ellen Hilderbrand. I absolutely love most of the books that I've read by her, and this is one of the ones I liked quite a bit. I'm not sure it makes my top 3, but it's probably in my top 6, so 5-Star Weekend is going in the I Love You category. This is definitely a book I would recommend to people who are just starting to get into Ellen Hilderbrand. I think it's one of her better ones. What I appreciate about this one is that it doesn't have a perfect wrapped up in a bow ending. There's a lot of juicy drama that keeps you turning the pages. Everyone is flawed and you have to just learn to accept it. It's a very human beach read. I also have a really big soft spot for Piglet by Lottie Hazel. I love a foodie story. I love a story about women who are writers. I love a story about people navigating really hard times in their relationships. And what I really appreciate about Piglet is that we know that there is some sort of betrayal in this marriage between the female main character and the male main character, but we never learn what it is. I know that would bother a lot of readers, but for me, I think it's really awesome that it's kind of left up to interpretation. You get to decide for yourself what would warrant the same emotional response from you that the female main character has in this story. I think in addition to that main plot point, there's a lot of individual character development that we get to see in our main character, and I love a character-driven story. Plus, there's a lot of really, really gorgeous language about food. So Piglet was probably one of my favorite reads of the year, and honestly, one of my favorite stories kind of all time. So on to Mount Rushmore, this hamburger novel goes. Next up, we have The Reality of It All by Alison Spica. It was a great read for January when the weather is really gray, your favorite social media app is about to get banned, you just kind of want to get lost in a little light romance. It's especially good if you are into reality television, specifically reality dating television shows like The Bachelor, Love is Blind, etc. This is the story about a very shy female writer who gets tricked into being on a reality dating show. She ends up paired up with this celebrity. Obviously, she knows that he's here for the wrong reasons. He's trying to like rehab his reputation. And against all odds, they fall in love and make it work. And it's just a darling little story. I was not mad that I read that book. then I wanted to keep on the romance track. I remember reading Funny Story on a very snowy weekend in January, and up until this point, I really hadn't felt very strongly about anything by Emily Henry that I read. But Funny Story is the first Emily Henry book that I really loved. It was one of those stories that I could not put down. I still think about the characters. I found the premise of how these two people met to be quite hilarious. They both got out of long-term relationships. They end up living together. They could not be more opposite. The living situation could not be more uncomfortable, and they just made it work. And it was so comical. And I remember thinking that there was a lot of individual growth in our female main character here. She's new to town. She has to make new friends. She's in this new job, and I just really loved watching Daphne grow. So Funny Story, I love you. Also very exciting that that is getting a screen adaptation. I am so excited for that. After Funny Story, we did a bit of a genre pivot and I started reading The Mystery Guest by Nita Prose. This is, I think, the second installment in the Molly the Maid series, which not everybody loves, but I love Molly the Maid. It's just a fun, cozy mystery about our awkward female main character, Molly. She's a maid in this fancy hotel, and for some reason, drama just follows her everywhere. She gets always wrapped into these intense, like, murder mysteries that happen at the hotel or are affiliated with people who work or stay at the hotel, and we just see her cobble through it. And I really like this series. It does something for me. It's lighthearted without being cheesy. It's thrilling without being anxiety producing. And I think it just has like a warm-hearted nature to it. There's a lot of really great found family elements here, and I just have like the warm fuzzies when I'm reading this story. So The Mystery Guest, I love you. After finishing The Mystery Guest by Nita Prose, I decided to dive into a true mystery thriller, and I read my first Lucy Foley book, The Paris Apartment. This was the definition of a page turner. I think I finished it in like 20 hours flat over the weekend. My one critique of this book is that there were an exorbitant amount of POVs to follow, and therefore a lot of characters. It all tied together really nicely at the end and came to a satisfying but not predictable ending, but you really have to pay attention while you're reading. Because I really can't remember the intricacies of the plot here, I'm gonna put it in not mad. My next book was The Crash by Frida McFadden. People have their feelings about Frida, but I am a Frida girl. I am not mad about an easy to read, page turning thriller. And so The Crash by Frida McFadden is going in not mad. It is by far not one of my favorites of hers, but it was entertaining enough. If you like Frida, you might as well read it. After all of the back-to-back thrillers, I decided to get back into my cozy foodie era, and I read The Restaurant of Lost Recipes. This was just kind of like a cozy fantasy story that feels like a warm hug. This is basically the story of an enchanted restaurant. People who have really been through something will show up at this restaurant, sit down, and the chef will make them a very specific dish. One that helps them process either a falling out in a relationship, some introspective question they have about themselves, coping with the loss of a loved one. It's a restaurant that provides you exactly what you need. Restaurant of Lost Recipes, not mad I read it. Glad I read it, actually. Next up, we have The Situationship by E.M. Wilson. I thoroughly enjoyed this light, fun, spicy romance. This is about two people who live in New York City. They are part of one of those elite circles where you run with the same crowd from preschool up until college. They were high school sweethearts. Some big, bad, mysterious thing happened that you don't find out about until the end that caused them to separate. And so you follow them through adulthood trying to navigate this gray area between, well, we have to see each other. Do we do the friends with benefits thing? Do we just not talk to each other unless we have a big group event? But there's so much history there, and these two people really understand and care for each other, so it's just the process of watching them come back together despite having all of these obstacles that have been thrown in their pathway, either by their families, by this friend group that's low-key a little toxic, or just by them being young people trying to figure themselves out. I think this is what the new reboot of Gossip Girl was trying to be, and so that is going in my not mad category. I very much enjoyed that book. Next up, we have The Master of Me by Keke Palmer. I thought it was such a good time. I actually think this might be the book that I started the 5 a.m. book club with. There were a lot of nice nuggets of wisdom in here about being true to yourself in your career and your personal life, and this idea that you don't necessarily need to fit into one mold and be that thing for the entirety of your life, that it is okay to evolve and change. It was a good time. I was not mad that I read that book. Next up we have The Trade-Off by Samantha Green Woodruff. This was a book that I read for one of the book clubs that I'm in, and I really enjoyed this story. This is one that I find myself thinking about often. It's the story of a woman who becomes involved in the New York Stock Exchange. She accumulates a massive amount of wealth, but it's obviously not so linear. There's a lot of up and downs in this process. She's obviously doubted quite a bit because she's a woman in a male-dominated space, and so it basically follows whether or not she will lose it all or keep some wealth when the stock market crashes. I'm gonna put this in not mad, but it's a little more than that. I really liked that book. Moving on to one of my standout romances of the year, and perhaps one of my standout romances of all time, we have Only for the Week by Natasha Bishop. Only for the Week is the perfect vacation read. Whether you're reading it while you're on vacation or you're reading it in the dead of winter hoping that you're gonna be on vacation, this is an excellent story. Our female main character goes on a trip to Tulum for her sister's destination wedding. The gag is, our main character's sister is marrying the ex of our main character. So there's a lot of tension going on there. Our main character says, whatever, I'm a hardworking doctor. I'm gonna take this vacation and just have the most fun humanly possible. I'm gonna ignore my sister's bad attitude. I'm gonna ignore my ex's stank attitude as well. And I'm gonna have a good time and do a 7-day fling with this guy who I have always thought is so hot. So they agree that this is something they will do only for the week. But in the context of this week, this man steps up for her in a way that nobody else has before. He just understands our girl to a T and does everything humanly possible to make her life easier, more fun, and protect her from people who are trying to take advantage of her or belittle her. It was amazing. I'm putting that on my Mount Rushmore. It was just phenomenal. Excellent. Next up, we have what I think is my final nonfiction book for the year, if I'm remembering correctly, The Misadventures of Awkward Black Girl by Issa Rae. This is one of her earlier memoirs, so it was kind of fun going back to like the pre-Insecure days and just hearing about how she really stepped into herself creatively and how she had to make it work before it was working. I'm very much not mad that I read this book. Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. A classic piece of dystopian literature. Octavia Butler is known for predicting the future, and there was something about reading this book in February of 2025 that was maybe just too close to home. It was just such a tough read. Not because it wasn't well written, well thought out, or well executed, just because it made you think really hard about all of the stressful things going on in the world while the world is really stressful. I'm going to put this book in not mad. I am not mad I read it, and I do really want to read Parable of the Talents, but I just have to be in a different headspace to pick up that book. After Parable of the Sower, I picked up Interpreter of Maladies by Jhumpa Lahiri because this was also a book club pick. I really liked this book. It's a series of short stories, actually. I think it's maybe like 6 or 8 stories. Each story follows either an Indian living in India or an Indian American, and it highlights in really powerful ways the challenge of being an immigrant in America, of living through the geopolitical conflicts that have happened in India. I remember feeling pretty neutral about this book as I was reading it because there were a couple stories that I really loved and then a couple that I found that I was kind of just slogging through. What I do remember thinking is that one of the very last paragraphs of this book is probably like the most beautiful writing that I have ever read in my life, but I can't say I loved the entire collection of stories that much. So for that reason, I am not mad that I read The Interpreter of Maladies. After Interpreter of Maladies, I picked up Lovesick by Deidre Duncan. I got to read this as an arc. If you like Grey's Anatomy, I think you would like this book. This is a romance between 2 OBGYN residents. It's an enemies or rivals to lovers sort of romance, but because they're doing residency together, it's not like they instantaneously decide, I don't hate this person anymore and actually I think I'm in love with them. There's a lot of time for the relationship to evolve in a very real setting that challenges them both personally and professionally. So when you see them finally come together, it just makes so much sense. I really enjoyed it, and there is a second installment in this world coming out, I think pretty soon, for one of the side characters. They're getting their love story and I'm very excited for that. So Lovesick by Deidre Duncan. I love you very, very much. And after doing all of these romances, lit fics, thrillers, I decided it was time to get back into my fantasy era. And so I dove right into Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. I loved it. This is a fantasy unlike any other fantasy that I've read before. I did not realize this when I picked up the book, but it very much follows the lore of the Knights of the Round Table. My mind was exploding in a good way. The magic system is unlike anything I've ever read before. It was really interesting to have this like medieval backstory to the magic while also being in a very urban environment for the current plot. I just really loved it. It's going in the I love you category. And I liked it so much that I then dove right into the sequel, Bloodmarked. And for me, Bloodmarked is a perfect book 2 in a series. We have our established conflict. Our female main character understands sort of the magic, but there's more to find out in order to defeat the big evil bad guy. And so you have your cast of characters split into two. One's going on one mission, the other's going on another mission. You worry because you know something bad is gonna happen to someone along the way. You're introduced to a whole nother layer of the magical world that you didn't get to see in book 1 because book 1 was just the foundation and book 2 is the advanced class. I devoured that book. It is maybe going on my Mount Rushmore. Is that fair to say? I really did love it. Yeah, I think I'm gonna put it there. I am. All the Colors of the Dark by Chris Whitaker. I was absolutely not prepared for how much I was gonna love that book. It is at its core a mystery. You're trying to find out who is behind these heinous crimes in this tiny southern town. But there's more to it than that. You follow our main characters from childhood to adulthood. So really you see the impact of these heinous crimes on a community and on the individuals who are affected, which is really powerful. I had borrowed a hard copy of this book and was listening to the audio. And while I was listening to the last like 20% of the book, it got so juicy and good that I like ripped my headphones out and picked up the hardcover and started reading because I read so much faster than I listen and I had to know what was going on in this story. I think this is a great book for anyone who's a fan of Law and Order SVU. And that's all I'll say. This is on my book Mount Rushmore easily. Once the paperback version of this book released, I bought a trophy copy for myself because I just need to own this book. I love it so much. I spent probably the better part of a weekend just reading that book and neglecting all of my responsibilities. So I needed a palate cleanser and I needed something easy breezy that I could just listen to while I did things around the apartment. And so we dove back into my girl Frida. I listened to Do You Remember by Frida McFadden. And I hate to say it, but I think this is gonna be our first soft pass. Not because it was bad, but because I really don't remember much of it at all. I'm not the type of person to try and like guess the twist in a thriller. I really do like to just be along for the ride. But this is one where I think I saw the twist coming, and so by the end I was very underwhelmed by it. And then I think Frida tried to take it a step further to do like a twist on the twist, and it just didn't work for me. But you know what? I got a lot of laundry done while I was listening to that book. It wasn't bad by any means. I just think you don't need to read it. Next up we have Shiver by Juliana Victoria. This is the 4th and final installment in her Philadelphia Players series, which is the only sports romance series that I truly love. All of the stories in this series are based in Philadelphia around a hockey team, although one of them is soccer, but primarily around a Philadelphia-based hockey team. They're fun, they're spicy, they're lighthearted, and all of them have a very strong found family element, which I really appreciate. Shiver is about an attorney who is helping one of the pro hockey stars gain custody of his daughter that he just learned about. So we watch him step into the role of being a single father, trying to support his baby's mother in a way that sets really strong boundaries, but is also trying to be supportive of the struggles that she's going through. And all the while, he's crushing on this attorney, and the attorney is crushing back on him. I think Shiver is going in not mad. Okay, I have to say something a little unpopular here, and I know that I'm probably in the wrong. But the next book that I picked up after Shiver was This Is How You Lose the Time War, and I listened to it. I didn't read it. I did it as an audiobook, which perhaps was a poor choice on my part because it's a book that's told entirely through letters, so you probably should read it. But because I didn't, I think it's gonna be a soft pass for me. I do think maybe I just need to revisit it either as an ebook or physical copy, give it a second chance, see if I feel any differently about it. But this was my experience. The audiobook of This Is How You Lose the Time War is a soft pass. Now we are getting into our April reads, which also just warms my heart because if you were here for April, you know that that means I started Short King Spring, where my goal was to finish 30 books in 30 days. I had started Water Moon by Samantha Soto-Yambo at the very end of March, so it was the first book that I finished in April, and you already know where I'm gonna put this book, Mount Rushmore. I love her. Actually, I love her so much, I'm putting her in front of all of the other ones that are already here. This is just a whimsical, magical, topsy-turvy sort of fantasy story, very reminiscent of like a Studio Ghibli film. It's the type of fantasy that is not for everyone, everyone, but if you pick it up and it's for you, it is just going to imprint itself on your soul the way it did mine. This story follows Hannah, who is about to inherit her family business. Her father runs a secret pawn shop where most people who walk by this shop would see a ramen restaurant, but if you're the type of person who needs to be a customer of this store, you would walk into this pawn shop where you could essentially sell your regrets and mistakes and trade them for something. So one morning, Hannah wakes up, she goes to the store, it's been broken into, her father is missing, and one of the most precious items in the store is missing. So she and this like male companion who also happens to wander into the store go on this adventure in another world to find her father. And in the process, Hannah is coping with the grief of losing her mother. She's also kind of entering a romantic relationship with her male comrade. It felt like watching a movie. I think Watermoon is for a specific type of person. If we generally have similar book tastes, then I think you would love Watermoon. That's all I'll say. If you get it, you get it. And if you don't, that's okay. In order to accomplish my 30 books in 30 days challenge, I read a bunch of what I called short kings, so books under or around 200 pages. After Watermoon, I dove into And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer by Frederick Bachman. This is a short story about grief, not only how it feels to lose someone, but how it feels to be the person who is leaving everyone who you love behind. This was an unexpected tearjerker. I listened to the audio while I was commuting to work and I had to like hold myself together because it really was so beautifully written and very moving. So I am not mad at Frederick Bachman's short little story. Then in the middle of Short King Spring, I had to read a very, very, very thick book for book club. The Most Fun We Ever Had by Claire Lombardo is for people who love a story about the complexity of family relationships, specifically when there's a big group of sisters. If you liked Hello Beautiful, I think you would like The Most Fun We Ever Had. I really enjoyed it. I am not mad that I read it. I am mad that I had to read it in April. Getting back to the true shorties, I then picked up Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata, and I think I read this in one night. This is a character-driven story about a woman who works at a convenience store. She's worked there for years. She has no ambition to move up the ranks. She is very happy to just do her rote job, have her minimal social interactions with others, have a job with very clear rules and distinctions, and just go home, rest, and prepare for work the next day. People in her life are trying to encourage her to be more ambitious, to try and find a romantic partner, and she lets herself be talked into doing that, and it goes completely awry. I think it's a great story about the importance of just being true to yourself. It's one of those books where nothing happens, but I loved it. Next up, I read The Fall Risk by Abby Jimenez, which is a very short romance that I believe is part of a collection of short romances written by very popular contemporary romance authors for Kindle Unlimited. This is about a woman who just moves into an apartment to get away from her stalker, and it's a super unique layout. So there's like a staircase going up to this floor where she lives, and then she has a neighbor across the hallway, and the stairs going up to their apartments give out. So they're essentially trapped up there. She runs into her neighbor on the landing. They obviously can't go anywhere for several days until someone fixes the stairs, and over the course of a very short amount of time, they fall in love. The way that Abby writes it, it's very sweet, very believable. I actually really loved this. Does this go in I Love You? It might. I really liked this story, especially because by the end we see her really come into herself and stand up to her stalker, and he gets his due justice, which I always appreciate. So I think The Fall Risk by Abby Jimenez goes in I Love You. In contrast, I then made time to read Say You'll Remember Me, even though it is by no means a short king, but it had just come out and I really wanted to read it. I am not mad that I read Say You'll Remember Me. It is by no means my favorite Abby work. I am obsessed with her previous series, The Part of Your World, Yours Truly, Just for the Summer trilogy. Love those. Say You'll Remember Me didn't have the same magic that I so loved about those other stories, but it was fine. I'll read the next one. I actually think I'm gonna like the next one way more than I liked Say You'll Remember Me, so stay tuned for that in 2026. Next up, we have The Last Conversation by Paul Tremblay, and I am going to put this in the soft pass category. I remember having an okay time while I was reading it. It's a very short sci-fi work, but I don't remember it so badly that I have to Google the premise of it right now. Imagine that you've woken up in an unfamiliar room with no memory of who you are, how you got there, or where you were before. All you have is the disconnected voice of an attentive caretaker, Dr. Kuhn, who is there to help you physically, emotionally, and psychologically. She'll help you remember everything. She'll make sure you reclaim your lost identity. Now answer one question. Are you sure you want to? It's a weird little book, but I would love to talk with somebody about it because I do remember how it ended and having a lot of questions and thoughts about that, but it's like one of those niche books that I don't know a single other soul out there who's read it, so if you have, let me know. Then I read When Women Were Dragons by Kelly Barnhill, which is also not really a short king, but just I needed something with some more substance after that last one, and I am putting this book in I love you. This is such a fun little fantasy or like speculative fiction sort of book. It follows the aftermath of an event called the mass dragoning, where one morning we wake up and many women just spontaneously turn into dragons. It then follows what the people who are left behind as humans do with this new dragon presence. Do we integrate them into society? Do we banish them to somewhere else? And I think there's a larger metaphor here for how we treat people who are different. There's certainly a lot of themes about the unrealistic expectations that we place on women. A lot of really beautiful commentary on the power of female friendships and female relationships. I just think it's such a great work. Next up, we have another short little romance, Drop, Cover, and Hold On by Jasmine Guillory. This is a story that's based in Los Angeles on the day of an earthquake. A woman walks into a bakery, the earthquake happens, and then she and the baker have to kind of deal with the physical fallout and the social fallout that happens when there is a mass event like that. I remember having a decent time, but it wasn't super memorable, so I'm gonna put Drop, Cover, and Hold On in soft pass. After that, I read The Deep by River Solomon, which is again another very unique fantasy book. This is a fantasy that follows a colony of mermaids who are descendants of the Black enslaved people who jumped overboard during the slave trade. There's a very strong oral tradition in this community, and so there's one person who is tasked with remembering all of the historical events and teaching it to the other mermaids so that they don't forget. So there's obviously a larger commentary there about the burden of remembering, but also the consequences of pretending that our history didn't happen. And so I just thought it was a really special book. But this is another book where not mad doesn't feel strong enough, but love feels too strong. Definitely recommend it. We have finally arrived to the first book that I finished but really disliked in 2025. If it wasn't Short King Spring, I definitely would have DNF'd it. I read The Bookstore Sisters, but I did not have a good time. This is about a woman who is living in New York and she has to go back to her small town because there's a family emergency. The family owns a bookstore. There's a question of who's gonna run the bookstore now. So this girl comes back. She has a lot of negative feelings about this town, about the bookstore, about her family relationships, and so they have to very quickly resolve it in the midst of this conflict. And I just found it to be very cheesy, very boring, very cookie cutter, nothing special. Regrets. After Bookstore Sisters, I needed something with some real action, so I decided to dive into the Mind F series by S.T. Abbey. The first book in that series is The Risk, and I'm gonna put that in I Love You because it introduced me to this overall series that I love. And book one, I ate up. I finished it really, really quickly, loved it. It's kind of hard for me as I'm going back to remember what exactly happened in each book in this series, so as I'm thinking about book two, Sidetracked, I'm going to put it in Not Mad. Putting it in I Love You feels a little strong because I can't remember book two as a standout amongst the 5-book series. But after that, I took a little break because I was reading Wuthering Heights. I don't know why I would put myself through the torture of reading this long, dry book in the middle of Short King Spring. It had to have been for book club. And this was a little bit of an unexpected experience for me because I really liked Wuthering Heights in high school, or so I thought I did, but reading it this time, I have regrets. I did not enjoy this story at all. I don't know what 17-year-old me was thinking, but current me does not get along with Wuthering Heights. Thankfully, the next book made up for it. I read The Answer Is No by Frederick Bachman, and this story packs a punch. This is about a curmudgeon who's living in an apartment building full of nosy people. All this man wants to do is work his little remote job, order some pad thai, and mind his own business. However, he gets roped into a bunch of drama amongst his neighbors, and while he's initially very resistant, we learn that he's actually quite a caring and rational person. And so obviously by the end of the story, he becomes an integral part of their community. There are some unexpected twists and turns and devastation that occurs in this book. It is so funny and I loved it. This is going on my book Mount Rushmore. This is unfortunately only an audiobook, but the second someone decides to turn it into a print work, I'm buying every single edition of it. The challenge that I ran into during Short King Spring is that a lot of these short works are very, very serious. And so I needed something that was just a little bit more lighthearted because I was starting to kind of fall into a funk. So I picked up Before the Coffee Gets Cold, which is about an enchanted coffee shop where you go in, you sit down, and for the length of time that your coffee is hot, you can have one last interaction with someone who is no longer in your life. So you kind of time travel while you're drinking this coffee. But the catch is you have to get back to the cafe before your coffee gets cold, or else, you know, terrible things happen in the space-time continuum. This is a book that I loved. I loved it because I really needed something more lighthearted and whimsical at that time, and I think I just loved it because it's consistent with books that I like. They have a fantasy element, they're cozy, they're food-centric. At this point in Short King Spring, I was starting to experience a little bit of burnout with how fast-paced the stories were, so I wanted to read something a little bit longer. So I dove into Deep Cuts by Holly Brickley. I thought I was really going to like this story because it's based around two musically inclined people. It's set in the 90s, and it follows this kind of toxic relationship between two people who meet in college, bond over their love of music, and then slowly make their way into the music industry in different ways. He becomes a pretty famous performer. She becomes his kind of behind the scenes songwriter, and they have to try and navigate their friendship and their kind of budding romantic relationship along with the two different aspects of their career. Overall, I just did not love it. I found this female main character to be like a little insufferable, and don't get me wrong, I feel for her. I think everyone goes through that period where they're very woe is me, self-indulgent. I really didn't love our male main character. I didn't think the two of them made each other better personally. Certainly the music aspect worked between them, but from a relationship standpoint, even as friends, I do not think that they were good for each other. And so for that reason, it is a soft pass for me. Borderline regrets. After that, I had to dive back into something I knew I would like, so I went back to the Mind F series and read Scarlet Angel. Again, I don't really remember book 3 as standing out a ton against the other books in the series, so it's going in Not Mad. All the Lies is also going in Not Mad. Then I had a really cool opportunity to beta read a book that I had seen promoted on social media by the author called Maladaptive by Julie Gunn. As I'm recording this, it's actually going to be indie published in, I think, February or March, which is really exciting. This is a romance about a woman who engages in a lot of maladaptive daydreaming. She's neurodivergent, she's a single mom, and she constantly has this fantasy of her being in a romantic relationship with this famous celebrity. And then one day she actually runs into him and he knows who she is. So they have this weird kind of otherworldly connection where he also has envisioned a life with her, and they're trying to figure out in the real world what that means because they have very, very different lives. I really liked this story. I think the premise is unique, and I think it's a romance where they get there happily ever after, but maybe not in the way that you would expect, and I just thought it was such a cool book. So I'm putting it in the I love you category, and I am so excited that it's finally getting published. Next up, we have another short little romance, Worst Wingman Ever, and I have to give this book a soft pass because this is another one where I just don't remember the plot. What I do remember is that this is a story about two people who are in the same bridal party. So we've got a bridesmaid and a groomsman. Something happens with the bride and groom. Somebody maybe runs out on the other one. I'm not quite sure. But over the span of the night before the wedding, these two people realize that they actually want to be together. And it was fine. I read it because I thought I would enjoy it. But this one was a flop for me. Oh, or am I mixing it up with Any Luck? Oh my god, that's embarrassing. Forget everything I ever said. I mixed up Worst Wingman Ever with Any Luck by Ashley Poston. So let's redo this really quickly. With Any Luck by Ashley Poston is the one about the bridesmaid and the groomsmen. That's going in soft pass. It was not very memorable for me. However, Worst Wingman Ever, I really liked. I'm not mad at that book. This is a story about a woman who is dealing with the loss of her grandmother. In that process, she's going to visit her grandma in the apartment community that she lives in, and someone keeps leaving little notes on her car, and this person is our male main character who works in that building. He's like part of the maintenance crew, I believe, and he also lives there as part of like a job perk. And so they keep having these like ship in the night moments where they're missing each other, but they're communicating through these little notes on the car. And they eventually meet and have a cute little romance, and I actually did enjoy that book, so I was not mad that I read that one. After Worst Wingman Ever, I dove back into the final installment in the Mind F series, series, and I read Paint It All Red by St. Abbey, and that is going in the I Love You category. I thought it was a great conclusion to this saga. I really like this series. It's a thriller romance of sorts, or maybe it's more like a mystery romance. Essentially, our male main character is a detective who's trying to solve a series of murders. Come to find out, our female main character is the one who's been committing them, and it's part of this like elaborate vengeance scheme. It's a great story about female rage. The detective does eventually find out that the girl that he is romantically involved with is the murderer that he's trying to catch at work. They become obviously very entrenched in each other's lives, and it just is so good. I really, really liked it. I think that any book I read after Mind F series was going to be a flop. So this is no disrespect to Claire Baglin, but On the Clock was a regrets story for me. This is a very character-driven story about a woman who works in a fast food restaurant. She's reflecting on her current state of life, but also looking back at her childhood and the role that food played in her family dynamic. It's a very reflective piece, but it did nothing for me. Regrets. I remember spending like a gorgeous sunny day on my roof reading this book and just having a bad time. Next up, we have The Sublet by Greer Hendricks, which is going in Soft Pass. This was a little thriller mystery about a quote-unquote like haunted apartment. This couple moves in, a whole bunch of weird things are happening. There's like a dodgy story about how the apartment became available. It's this gorgeous apartment that doesn't make any sense why it's vacant. It was entertaining. It wasn't mind-blowing. I hardly remember the twists and turns, but I remember having a decent time. Soft Pass. It just didn't do anything lasting in my memory. Comfort Me with Apples, however, that is going somewhere between I Love You and Mount Rushmore, because this is probably the weirdest book that I have ever read, and it's another one of those books where it's kind of hard to explain the plot without giving it all away. Broadly speaking, this couple moves into a gated community of sorts. The woman is a stay-at-home wife and her husband goes out and works, but she has to kind of play nice in this society that's in the community. There's a lot of really specific rules that they need to follow, and over time she starts to learn that the community is just not what it seems and her husband is not who she thinks he is. I'll leave it at that. Rating I'm gonna put in I Love You. Next up, we have By the Book by Jasmine Guillory. This was another short king. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling where our female main character works in publishing and our male main character is the reclusive son of a star, and so she is trying to get him to write a biography about his family so that she can publish and sell it. She goes to his house, she convinces him to write this story. He's a very grumpy man. He's got some conflicted feelings about airing out his family's dirty laundry. She convinces him it's the right move for him. In the process of her staying in his beautiful house, they fall in love. It was a fun little time. I am not mad that I read this book. One of my favorite reads of April was Honey by Isabel Bonta, and I feel like this book did for me what Deep Cuts did for everybody else. This is also a story about two people who are in the music industry, but in this story, both the female and male main characters are performing artists. There is that same level of toxicity where you question whether or not these two people should be together, and honestly, they probably shouldn't, but I found both of the characters and everyone in this world to just generally be more likable than the characters in Deep Cuts. I really, really liked this book. It's one that stuck with me. It's going in I Love You. Next up, we have My Sister, the Serial Killer, and I am so sad to say this is going in Soft Pass. This is one of those stories where you know that there can't be a good ending here. So this follows two sisters. One is a serial killer. The other knows or learns eventually that she is a serial killer and has to decide, well, am I gonna turn in my family or am I gonna help her cover this up? She ends up kind of being a massive enabler, and I just found that there was nobody to root for in this story. There's no justice served, nobody makes a good decision, no one is likable. Soft Pass. Honestly, borderline regrets. Maybe it's regrets. I don't think I liked this book. It's going in regrets. It was sad that I read it, honestly. My last short king of April was such a fun, quirky little read. I read The Grown Up by Gillian Flynn. This is about a woman who goes to be a nanny for a family, and part of her responsibilities is to obviously clean this big creepy house and care for this child who is claiming a lot of scary things, and it becomes one of those situations where the nanny has no idea who's telling the truth and who isn't, and in the end she hedges her bets on the kid and things go from there. It is so weird. I remember my mouth being agape when I read it. I'm gonna put it in not mad. borderline love, but not mad. At some point in the spring, I also had the opportunity to beta read More Than My Mistakes by Amanda Lynette. This was a lovely romance about two people who meet when they're pretty young and then grow into young adulthood and really find themselves both personally and professionally. Our female main character is dealing with a lot of guilt with some tragic event that happened when she was in college that caused her whole life to kind of tailspin. And so we pick up in kind of their young adulthood. She's working at a bank. She's abandoned all of her creative pursuits, but then she has an opportunity to get back into the thing that really lights her up the most, which is, you know, storytelling through photography, videography. And her ex-boyfriend is part of that journey as well. And it was just such a beautiful story about growth, about what it means to truly love a person through their worst moments. I thought it was really delightful and so like unique and fresh. I am not mad that I read this book. And that was the end of my Short King spring. So now we are diving back into full-length books for the rest of the year. And I decided to start with a book that had been on my TBR for a while. I read The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston, and that is going on my book Mount Rushmore. It has everything that I like in a romance. Characters that I like both individually and as a couple, people who love food and love books, and a little bit of magic. So there is a kind of time warp in this apartment where our female main character moves in, and she's staying with a man who is, unbeknownst to both of them, living 7 years in the past. When they encounter each other in the real world outside of the apartment, there is a time gap between their experiences, but when they're in the apartment, our female main character is still living in the present, but she's met the male main character 7 years in his past. But once they figure out that they are in very different parts of their life in the present, they have to decide if there's a way to possibly make it work. In addition to the romance and the magic of it all, our female main character is grieving deeply for the relative who left her this apartment, and it's really, really moving. 7-Year Slip deserves all the hype, in my opinion. I was on a romance kick, so then I read When in Rome by Sarah Adams, which is definitely a very different vibe. It's a really sweet story about a celebrity who needs an escape from the limelight, and she ends up in Rome, Kentucky. It's one of those classic Hallmark, like big city girl, small town guy, can they make it work? She's famous, what's she gonna do there? Yada, yada, yada. It was fun. I think I would read other books in this series just when I need something lighthearted. Not my absolute favorite, but not mad that I read it. Then we have one of my most favorite reads of all time, Aftertaste by Daria Lavelle. You already know this is going up on the Mount Rushmore, probably, honestly, right next to Watermoon. They deserve to be right up there at the tippy top together. This story follows Kostya, who is an immigrant in New York. He suffers a deep loss early in his life, and as he moves into adulthood, he realizes he has a special power to taste the favorite meals of ghosts and recreate them. As a result of creating the ghost's favorite meal, he gives the living relatives of this lost person the opportunity to have like one last conversation together over this meal until the food is gone. That's the bare bones summary of it, but then it evolves into something much more complex because our main character Kostya then starts to use this as a way to move up in the restaurant world in New York. It starts out really benign, but then it grows into something much more complicated, a little nefarious, and it comes to such a perfect and devastating conclusion. I am still kind of processing it. It blows my mind that this is Daria Lavelle's debut novel. It is exceptional. Right before this book published, it was actually released too that it's going to be a movie at some point, and I just think that's going to be so visually stunning. I cannot wait. Definitely recommend this book. To help with the come down from Aftertaste, I read Not Safe for Work by Nisha Tooley. This is a fun little workplace romance, an enemies to lovers situation that takes place between two engineers. Our female main character does not understand why everyone at the office is so enamored with our male main character. They end up going on a workplace retreat in Hawaii. Obviously, because there's been a booking error, they have to share a room with only one bed. And ultimately, she learns that there is more than meets the eye with him. He has a secret soft side, he's not a terrible person, and he ends up being a very strong advocate for her because she is a brown woman in STEM who is constantly overlooked, constantly harassed, and he really steps up to be a decent guy, and I loved it. Next up we have The Anatomy of Magic by J.C. Cervantes. This is about a woman who comes from a family of magical women. She goes home to the ranch where she grew up. There is a problem with the source of their magic that these sisters need to come together and solve, and in the process of going back to her small town, she ends up reconnecting with her childhood love. At the time, I liked it but didn't love it, and so I think, like I said, I'd probably put it in not mad or soft pass. So I'll put it in soft pass. But I very much loved my next magical story, Evergreen Conservatory by Heather Schneider. I just love this series. The Evergreen Academy is a school for magical botanists. In the first book in this series, our main character Briar learns that she is a magical botanist and she gets to study at this school that's like in the woods just outside of her California town. She ends up developing a crush on one of the like elite family members' children who is also a student at the school. And so Evergreen Conservatory is the second installment in this series where the political conflict really starts to pick up. Basically, the elite family is trying to interfere in magical education. And so we see our main character and her friends try and do something about that. This is easily going in the I love you category. I just love the whimsical nature of this book. It's a romantasy that focuses really heavily on the emotional connection between these characters rather than a physical connection. And I just think it's such a sweet story. I love it. Book 3 is coming out this spring and I cannot wait. Okay, then I read Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry, and I'm gonna put this in, I think I'm gonna soft pass on Great Big Beautiful Life. You know, the thing that was really infuriating about reading this book is that all along I was having a pretty good time. It was very reminiscent of The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, where we're getting the backstory on this illustrious figure who has kind of had this very famous life, but then in her older years decides to kind of step out of the limelight, and we're finally getting her story on what happened. At the same time, there's a romance brewing between the two reporters who are trying to gather this story. I found myself very uninterested in the romance between these characters. To me, it just didn't make sense why they loved each other at all. I was very interested in the backstory of this celebrity woman, but then by the end of it, it took a twist that I was super not interested in. I was very hot and cold throughout the whole reading experience, and so I think ultimately it's a soft pass. It's a pretty thick book, and so I just think if you're gonna read that many pages, you should have a good time. But then I had a really great time reading the last book in the Molly the Maid series, The Maid's Secret by Nita Prose. I found that this just tied up that series into such a nice bow. Obviously, our girl Molly is gotten into some more trouble again, but this one focuses less on a new mystery and more on the history of Molly's grandmother, who is a very special figure in her life. And so while there is a current mystery conflict going on at the hotel, it does tie back to Molly and her grandmother's family history. And I thought it was just such a sweet and special way to end this 3-book series. So I am definitely putting The Maid's Secret in I love you. Bunny by Mona Awad. Where to put this book? Somewhere between Mount Rushmore and I Love You, because this was such a ride. Bunny is a satirical, dark academia sort of story about a grad student who gets involved with this clique of other women in her graduate program. And these women are doing some strange things. Whenever they see each other on campus, they're saying, "Oh, hi, Bunny. Oh, I love you, Bunny. Oh, Bunny, you look so great today." They call each other Bunny. They're fawning all over each other. They have this like secret ritualistic happy hour where they do all these secret things that nobody knows about until our female main character becomes kind of absorbed into the group and starts getting in on all of their weirdness, and it is just so bizarre, but also you can't stop reading it. So I love you, Bunny. Next up, we have Butter by Asako Yuzuki. I am putting Butter in Not Mad. I think similar to Great Big Beautiful Life, I was pretty hot and cold when I was reading it. There were parts that I was really intrigued by and parts that I didn't love so much. I think one of the more interesting commentaries is the expectations of women about their bodies, about who they should be in relation to men. I think another part of this that I really liked though is that our female main character doesn't subscribe to those ideas. After struggling with them for a really long time, she decides to abandon all of that and creates meaningful relationships in a way that is more authentic to her. And I think that was a really great example of how you can live a life that is just true to yourself without being like cookie cutter what you think you should be doing. There is obviously this like bigger plot of interviewing this woman who allegedly like killed all of her ex-boyfriends and husbands, and the question being, did she really do it? If she did do it, is it justified? I thought that was gonna be much more intriguing than it actually ended up being. And this might be by design, but I feel like in the beginning I was very sympathetic with this woman who was behind bars, and then by the end I was like, just leave her there. It's fine. Definitely an interesting experience. I am not mad that I read it. Another one that's kind of in between not mad and I love you is Yes, Daddy by Jonathan Parks Ramage. I have never read a book like this. This is a queer thriller horror sort of romance story. It's about a young man who's living in New York City. He's broke as anything and he gets involved with this wealthy, terrible man. He gets invited out to his Hamptons house. He becomes basically like enslaved by this man. It is really dark, but really compelling. It's awful from a content standpoint. It was wonderful from a writing standpoint. So it's weird to say I had a good time reading it. I didn't have a good time, but I think it was a poignant story. I am not mad at Yes, Daddy. So after that heavy, heady piece, I wanted something light and fun. And so I picked up Problematic Summer Romance. You have all heard me say a million times that Ali Hazelwood is so hit or miss for me. Picked up Problematic Summer Romance thinking I would have a great time, and I think I regret it. I just didn't enjoy it. I think the trope here is brother's best friend, if I'm remembering correctly, and there's a huge age gap, and essentially the whole time we're jumping back and forth between a wedding on a gorgeous Italian island, I did love the setting, and this history between Maya and her love interest, who is like, I don't know, 12 years her senior or something. But I felt like the whole time I was trying to figure out, why does she like him so much and why does he like her so much? Like, I just couldn't believe their love story for like a good portion of the book. So in regrets it goes. But thank goodness, right after I read It's Different This Time by Joss Richard, and that restored my faith in contemporary romance. That is a Mount Rushmore, like, head of the pack romance read for me. This is the story about Adam and June, who end up moving into this gorgeous brownstone together by happenstance. They're both broke, they're both trying to establish themselves. June is an aspiring actress, Adam is an aspiring chef. They're both at the earliest stages in their careers. They have no money, no connections, they just need to be in New York and try and make it happen. And they do. And in the course of that, they end up becoming really, really, really good friends, and obviously they get together. But then the story picks up several years in the future where that didn't pan out and the person who owned the brownstone passes away and leaves it to the two of them. So they have to come back to New York. Well, June comes back to New York from California. Adam had stayed there, and they have to legally figure this out. And in that process, June, who is broke again, ends up staying in the brownstone, and Adam kind of like comes and goes and they like rekindle their romance, and it is just wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. This is another story where it's not just the couple and the getting together that I love, but the individual growth of these two people, specifically June. And so I love just seeing her evolution, not just them getting together, and I just love that book so much. If you like a contemporary romance, you will love It's Different This Time. It's perfection to me. I decided to keep the fun vibes going by reading Sounds Like Love by Ashley Poston. I am not mad at this book. It was a fun beach read. It takes place in a South Carolina beach town. There are some quirky side characters. There's a very lighthearted nature to it. Female main character is dealing with the fact that her family is selling this historic theater that was a huge part of her childhood, and at the same time she's forming this romantic connection with this celebrity because they can both musically hear the same song playing together in their mind, and essentially their romance grows as they figure out how to produce this song together. The thing that I really think is awesome about Ashley Poston books, and I think this is true in both Sounds Like Love and The 7-Year Slip, is that the magic is not a huge part of the romance. The magic is only part of the meet cute. That's what gets them together, but what helps them stay together is actually the connection that they form together, and as their romance progresses, the magic actually falls away. And I just think that's such a masterful use of magic in a romance story. Sounds Like Love was just not as strong as 7-Year Slip for me. I picked up Barefoot by Ellen Hilderbrand. We have 3 women who decide that they need a weekend away on Nantucket. They are all dealing with various things. One has a very significant health diagnosis, one just got let go from her job, and one is having marriage problems. But because they're all going through very different things and need different things to get through that, they clash with each other quite a bit. It was highly entertaining. It's definitely one of my more preferred Ellen reads, but as I'm thinking about this list, I don't think I loved it, but I really liked it. I am not at all mad that I read it. After Barefoot, I wanted to get back into my fantasy bag, so I read The Book of Azriel by Amber Nicole. I'm gonna say I am not mad at The Book of Azriel. This is a true enemies to lovers story. These two people are truly enemies at the start of the story, but over time they kind of develop this relationship where they become comrades, like focused on the same goal, and obviously it turns more romantic. The end of this book is wild to me. It stressed me out. It was so good. And that is what I will say about the Book of Azriel. I was not mad about it and definitely want to read more books in the series. Oh, then I picked up Dog Friendly by Victoria Shade. I might love this book, I think, actually. I do. It was so lighthearted. It was like the perfect book to just bring your blood pressure down after a book like Book of Azriel. This is about a burnt out veterinarian who has the opportunity to just take a whole summer off, be at the beach, and dog sit one of her senior dog clients in their gorgeous beach mansion. And so obviously she takes this opportunity. She's on this beach retreat. She's trying to keep a low profile. She doesn't want people to know she's a vet. She doesn't want to talk about all of the hard things she's dealing with, both in her professional career, but also historically. There's some stress going on between her and her brother that she's trying to work through. But while she's in this beach town, she obviously falls in love with another dog owner. It's just the right amount of stress and tension where it doesn't overactivate your nervous system, but it's not boring. I loved it. Then I read My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. This is a book that me and a few of my good friends were doing like an informal book club where we read the books in the Neapolitan series like at our own pace so we can talk about it together. I'm putting My Brilliant Friend in I Love You. It was a really excellent book about female friendship in this small town in Italy during a time where women's job was to drop out of school by middle school and just be married. And so one follows that traditional pathway and one decides to kind of go on and pursue more academic pursuits, and it follows how they try to maintain their friendship in the context of being just such different people. The end of this book also has a twist that had me clutching my pearls, gasping on a live stream. It was so tragic, such a tragic way to end the book. It's made me like pause to diving into book 2 because I need to be ready for emotional turmoil, but I definitely will be. I really liked this book. I thought it was really gorgeously written as well. It was just phenomenal, stupendous. And then I really one-upped myself because after My Brilliant Friend, I read One Golden Summer by Carly Fortune. I think similar to It's Different This Time, One Golden Summer to me is just peak romance. It was absolute perfection. It picks up where Every Summer After left off, and I had a lukewarm experience with Every Summer After, but I am really grateful that I had that experience because it made reading One Golden Summer 20 times more exceptional than it would have been if I didn't read Every Summer After. To me, I think those two books should be one anthology. You don't have to read Every Summer After to read and love One Golden Summer, but I do recommend it. Charlie Florek, perfect male main character to me. Alice is also a peak romance female main character to me. She is artsy, she is shy, she needs some help coming out of her shell, and then she encounters Charlie, who is just like the perfect person to do that. This is the first romance book I read where I was like, wow, the banter is really hitting. Like, I have never been able to say that about a romance book. I don't really find myself to be like a banter sort of girl, but in this story, the way that they flirt with each other, the way they kind of like poke fun at each other, the way that they use all of those jokes to like help them grow and no one ever takes it too far or takes things too personally, it is just beautiful. It's like poetry in motion. If you are a romance person, you have to read One Golden Summer. It is just spectacular, phenomenal, 10,000 stars. Had a real vibe shift. I then dove into King of Ashes by S.A. Cosby, which is going in the not mad section. S.A. Cosby's writing was like pure pressure. This is my first book of his that I read, and I certainly will be reading more. It stressed me out in the best way possible. It's one of those books where you can't possibly see a happy ending in sight for any of the characters, but you keep reading anyway because you're just so compelled to find out what is going to happen here. I'm not sure that I love it, but it was very, very good. Summer on the Bluffs by Sunny Hostin. I think this is going in I Love You. This is a story that follows this older Black woman who acquired a lot of wealth in the stock exchange, and she chooses to mentor 3 young Black women who come to her house on Martha's Vineyard. They get tennis lessons, they get tutoring, they get every opportunity to advance throughout their childhood, and then it shows us what they end up doing with all of those skills in adulthood. They end up getting invited back to the house on Martha's Vineyard because it seems that it's time for the the house to go to somebody. And so it's this question of, well, which one of these three girls is going to get this house inheritance? But then it also unveils this bigger mystery of why were these three specific girls chosen? It was such a page turner, very complex, very emotional, and in some ways really inspiring as well. I will definitely be reading the other books in this series. Next up, we have Something Tangled, Something True by Juliana Victoria, who I mentioned earlier wrote that Philadelphia sports romance. This is her first kind of more like ranch style romance, and it was my first foray into a genre like that, and I am not mad about it. Our female main character is a dance instructor with a chronic illness who ends up getting out of this terrible engagement to this man who was awful, moving back to her hometown ranch, and then falling back in love with her childhood love, who also is a ranch manager on the property. And he just supports her hopes and dreams. He helps her build a dance studio in the community. He helps her when her chronic illness makes it hard for her to do things around the house. And he just loves her properly. That's one thing about Juliana Victoria. She can write a man who can thoroughly love every detail of a woman in like the exact way that she wants to be loved, and it is beautiful. There's also a bigger kind of like mystery aspect going on, because as our female main character is trying to rebuild her life, there is someone in the town who is sabotaging her at every step, so we see that play out as well. It was great. I really liked it. Not mad at all. Ooh. Then I read Jeweler to the Blessed by Gillian Witt, which is like maybe one of the most unique fantasy books I've ever read. That is going in I Love You for sure. In this story, the magic system is housed in basically mood rings. All of the magic is tied to this specific type of stone, and the way that you channel your power is by harnessing your emotions. In this story, our female main character is the descendant of the person who like crafts the jewelry for the elite ruling class, who is the only group of people who have magic in this society. But then the jeweler goes missing, and so our female main character becomes caught up in this scheme of, well, did you help him disappear? Are you gonna help us make this jewelry? Because she's kind of in a precarious situation and now gets absorbed as like an assistant to the ruling class, the whole like working class who's kind of rebelling against the societal structure then starts to target her because they're mad at her for helping. I feel my summary is not doing this story justice, but it was very, very good. I have no idea when the next book in the series is coming out, but the second it does, I'm sad. Next up, we have another Ellen work. We have The Blue Bistro, which I'm going to put in not mad. What I really liked about The Blue Bistro is that it is food heavy. Most of Ellen's books have a lot of gorgeous writing about food, but because this takes place at a restaurant and follows restaurant staff, there is just so much language about food. It follows Adrian, who comes to Nantucket to kind of start fresh, start a new life, and she ends up getting romantically involved with another staff person at the restaurant. However, this person is spoken for but not spoken for in many ways by another person at the restaurant who's the head chef. Those two people have a long-standing history that Adrian's kind of like, okay, I don't know how I fit in here, and so they have to figure out how to make that work in this high pressure cooker of a restaurant environment. At the end, I'm not sure I was satisfied with how everything tied up, so to speak. So for that reason, it's not getting an I Love You, it's getting a I'm not mad. The Baby Dragon Cafe by A.T. Qureshi, that's going on my Mount Rushmore. Every now and then you need a book that's just gonna take the pressure off, and Baby Dragon Cafe does that with like a little hint of magic. In this story, our female main character is running a cafe. It was the dream of her and her grandmother to have this cafe where there's lots of Desi inspired drinks and desserts, and one of the unique aspects is that they allow baby dragons to come into the cafe, which is unique because baby dragons are unpredictable, uncontrollable, they don't know yet how to handle their magic, and so they're often like burning stuff and scratching stuff up, but they really wanted a place for the baby dragons and their owners to be able to feel comfortable enough to just relax. One of the members of like the higher class families in this world has a baby dragon who is super unruly, and our cafe owner has a special way with this dragon, and so our male main character, who is kind of shy, kind of grumpy, says, you know what, how about you just take my dragon, you train it up, and then once it's mature, like I'll take it back. And in that process, obviously they develop a camaraderie and eventually a romance, and I just think it's really, really sweet. Next up, I read Monk and Robot, which is like two Becky Chambers books smashed together, A Psalm for the Wild-Built and A Prayer for the Crown-Shy. This story takes place in a world in which we as a society have got this like advanced robot species who at some point decides the best thing for the robot race and the human race is for the robots to just go off and live in the forest and for humans to just exist in a low-tech world. But ultimately what ends up happening is one of the monks of this world is venturing through the forest, and they end up encountering one of the robots, and the robot says, I cannot return to my robot community until you tell me, what do humans need? And so it becomes very philosophical. Like, what do we need as a species? So the monk and the robot go on a series of adventures together, just kind of exploring human nature and trying to figure out how can or should the robots reintegrate into society? Are the humans better off without this technology? It was very thought-provoking and comforting at the same time. Not mad. Next up, we have An Academic Affair by Jodi McAllister, Mount Rushmore. This was a really great year for contemporary romance for me. An Academic Affair is a classic rivals to lovers romance. Both our female and male main character are writers. They're in the same undergrad program, they end up in the same grad program, and then they end up vying for the same faculty position, which is extremely cutthroat. What they end up deciding is that one person applies for the job and the other comes on as the partner hire. And so it navigates them going through the interview process to make that happen, them coming up with this scheme so that they can both get a job, and then dealing with all of the historical factors that made them not like each other in the first place. Their families don't get along, each of them has individual family stressors that they're dealing with, and then just the pressures of the academic job market. And so amongst all of that, they form a really beautiful romance together, and I just thought it was exceptionally well done. I am so excited because we are getting a second installation in this series that follows two of the side characters who I fell in love with during An Academic Affair, so I cannot wait for that to come out. Then we have The Magnificent Ruins by Nayantara Roy. This is about a woman who is living in New York, but she ends up going back home to, gosh, where is she from? Calcutta, because her grandfather passes away, and so she has to deal with the whole mess of who's inheriting this massive family house. There's a lot of complex family relationships that she's stepping into. She has a partner in New York, but she also now has to interface with her childhood love when she's back in Calcutta. It wasn't my favorite read, but it wasn't by any means a bad read. I just wasn't super in love with any of the characters or with the plot. And so while I think originally I probably would have put it in soft pass, I think at this point I'm gonna be more ruthless and I'm gonna put it in regrets. It's a pretty thick book and I didn't have the best time by the end. Next up we have A Magical Girl Retires by Park Sol-yeon. I was so excited to pick up this book. It's a really short read and it's very Sailor Moon adjacent. This is about a millennial magical girl whose life is falling apart, but then she learns that she has magic powers. She is taken under the wing of another magical girl and there's this big enemy who they need to learn to fight. So our main character has to figure out how she can harness her powers in order to fight the good fight. It was really funny. It's like a very satirical work, and even though it's called like A Magical Girl Retires, it's funny because, you know, in most of these like magical girl stories, the protagonist is often like a middle school girl or a teenager, and so this is like someone who's in her 30s and doesn't have her life together, and so all the other magical girls are like, you're gonna help us? Are you sure? I'm gonna put this in not mad. It was a super fun time. Listen for the Lie by Amy Tintera. That is going to be a soft pass for me. If I'm remembering the plot correctly, there is this big bad crime that happened in this town, and our female main character is the prime suspect, even though the victim was her best friend. She goes back to her hometown. I forget what exactly brings her back there, but she ends up going onto this podcast that is retrospectively examining all that happened in that crime and is interviewing her now. I remember not loving the writing style here. There was a specific word that our narrator kept using to describe the podcast host. I think it was smug. I think it was like every 3 pages we found out how smug he was. Our female main character makes poor decisions throughout the entirety of this book. I was rooting for her, but overall I just thought this story was not as strong as it should have been, and it was definitely overhyped. Am I even glad I read it? I don't know that I am, but I don't think I regret it because this is another one where I wanted to be a proper hater. So, soft pass. After Listen for the Lie, I read The Love We Found by Jill Santopolo, which I really enjoyed. This is a sequel to The Light We Lost. The Love We Found picks up at the end of that story and follows our female main character in dealing with the fallout from book 1. I really enjoyed it. I found that some of the communication between the adults and the children in the book was really advanced for the child's reported age. It was just unrealistically healthy, not in the sense that we shouldn't aspire to that level of communication. It just did not at all feel developmentally appropriate for the age of the kids who were in the book. But ultimately, I'm not mad I read it. I do feel like the story healed in me what was broken by book 1, so I very much appreciate it for that. Then I dove into the Baby Dragon Bakery, which, similar to the Baby Dragon Cafe, was just a nice, sweet lighthearted read. The Baby Dragon Bakery is not strangers to lovers, it is childhood friends to lovers. And the whole plot here essentially is, will they or won't they confess their feelings to each other? This book is going in the I love you category. I thoroughly enjoyed that one. Then we had another really interesting fantasy, dystopian, speculative fiction sort of book. Conform by Ariel Sullivan is as if Hunger Games and The Handmaid's Tale had a baby. This is about a dystopian society in which the elites live in this like beautiful cloud city in the sky, and everybody beneath them lives on the ground. The primary role of women in this environment is to serve as vessels for babies. And so by happenstance, our female main character, even though she is a lowly defect in this society, gets chosen to be the mate of somebody who is very high ranking in the elite class. So though she is excited in some ways because this means a lot of advancement and security for her, she also starts to make some relationships with members of a rebel group who is trying to take down the upper class. And so she ends up in a situation where she's sort of a double agent. She is trying to gather information on the elite class and bring it back to the rebel group, but then in that process she also starts to feel some sympathy for this person who she's mated to and starts to question the motivations of the rebel group. It ends, of course, on a plot twist, which makes you so excited to pick up book 2. I am putting it in I love you. After Conform, I picked up Discipline by Mark Avery, which is a Philadelphia-based mystery thriller. Follows Discipline, who is wrongly convicted as a young man and then seeks his vengeance out on various characters throughout the story. So the whole plot is, how will he get away with this? Will he get away with this? And you get some nice Philadelphia scenery throughout. I'm gonna put this in not mad. It was an enjoyable thriller story. Then I read Family Spirit by Diane McKinney Whetstone, which is also a Philadelphia-based story. It follows a family of women who have this gift called the knowing. So they all have premonitions. In this story, our main character, Anaya, returns to the family home because she's really struggling with this power that she has. There isn't really a key conflict here. It just explores the family dynamics between all of these women, some of whom tell our main character to kind of suppress her gift and hide it. It follows her internal struggle with that. It explores the caring role that women often take in a family. And I'm not mad I read it. It was a nice little story. It wasn't super memorable for me, but it generally has all of the elements that I like in a book, so I'm not mad I read it. Then, keeping with the magical witchy theme for the month of October, I read The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. This was a book club pick, and we all agreed that it was a Mount Rushmore amazing 5-star book. Again, it was cozy without being cheesy, really strong element of found family. The premise here is that there is a witch who feels very isolated. She gets together with the Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches once every month or every few months because really they have to hide their magical powers so that they are not persecuted. But that creates for a very lonely lifestyle. So one of our witches goes on the internet and posts on social media like a witch. She is really a witch, but she does all these magic tricks, and the whole idea is that everybody thinks she's just pretending, but she really is a witch. Her video comes across the feed of someone who is taking care of several young witches who need a mentor to teach them magic. This person's immortal, he can't teach them, so when he sees these witchy videos online, he's like, you know what? I know she's a real witch. So he reaches out to her. She ends up visiting them in the countryside and starts to mentor these young witches. So one of the caretakers there is very grumpy and protective, but obviously he is our male main character love interest. They fall in love. They form this beautiful little family in this cottage where she finally feels like she belongs somewhere and is fully seen for who she is. And I just loved it. I loved it so much, I dove right into book 2, A Witch's Guide for Magical Innkeeping, which I'm gonna put in the not mad category. It did not bring the same level of whimsy and comfort as the Very Secret Society for Irregular Witches, but it was an enjoyable story. There was more political conflict going on here where our female main character lost all of her powers after trying to resurrect a loved one. And so in the course of trying to get her powers back, she has to fight with like this government overlord who is just a terrible, terrible guy. So she does some scheming with our male main character to try and get her powers back. They get betrayed along the way. It gets very convoluted, but at the end, they find their place. It's a happy ending, so I'm not mad I read it. Then for a different book club, I read Recursion by Blake Crouch, and that is a Mount Rushmore book for me. This is the first book I read by Blake Crouch. I think he has a more popular one, Dark Matter, that was recently turned into a show. I think the themes are very similar between Dark Matter and Recursion. It asks the question of, if time travel is possible, should we utilize it? How do we utilize it ethically? All of the individual problems that it causes, but also on a global scale, how problematic it is to have this technology. There was an unexpected romance in this book that I really loved. It just really broke my brain in the best way possible. I think if you are a sci-fi person, definitely read Recursion. Man. Fall was such a good reading season for me. I then dove into One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig, which is going in I Love You. This is such a wonderful fantasy with one of the most unique magic systems I've read. Essentially, there are two sources of power. You can either get power from this like magical deck of cards, which has a very finite amount in this world, or you get power through this mystical mist and this illness. But if you get magic in that way, it's very unbridled, it's perceived as really dangerous, so anyone who comes down with this illness is sentenced to death. But if you're one of the people who has good magic, meaning you're probably from an elite family and you're getting it from the cards, that's okay. This story follows our main character Elsbeth, who secretly has magic from an illness, but she's hiding it from everyone. She gets entangled with this rebel group who's trying to find all of the 12 cards that give magical powers, because it's said that if you have all of the cards together, then you can heal people who have become sick from the mist. I really love the premise of this story. I really love the atmospheric nature. It's very like dark and woody, but the pacing really threw me off. It's very stop and go, and so for that reason, it doesn't go on the Mount Rushmore, but it's like really close. After I read One Dark Window, I wanted to start getting into like the Christmassy spirit, so I read Winter Street by Ellen Hilderbrand. It follows a family who runs an inn on Winter Street, and every single person in this family is going through it. The dad who owns this inn is coping with the fallout of his marriage. One of his sons recently was involved in a white-collar crime scheme and is about to lose his job and perhaps his family. Our female main character still lives on Nantucket. She's a teacher and she's trying to figure out if she wants to date this person who works at her school who is clearly in love with her. And one of the sons is overseas in Afghanistan and nobody knows if he is safe or not. And I really loved it. It ended on such a twist that I really wanted to dive right into book 2, but I had other books that I wanted to read more immediately. I am going to put Winter Street by Ellen Hilderbrand in I Love You. We will see what the rest of the series brings, but I really enjoyed that first installment. After that, I pivoted to Wild Reverence by Rebecca Ross, and I absolutely loved that book. I think it's going on my Mount Rushmore. This is a classic, atmospheric Rebecca Ross story. If you read Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows, the writing style is extremely similar. This is a love story between a mortal and a goddess, and I really loved getting to dive into the world of the gods and all of the complicated games that they play with each other to acquire each other's magic. What I will say in this story is I very much understand why our male main character loved our female main character. I love our male main character and his commitment to his community and his strong family ties and the way that he just adores our goddess. I'm not quite sure why she loves him. I understand why I love him, but I'm not sure why she does. That being said, because I'm rooting for him and she chooses him, I'm very happy for the two of them together. So Wild Reverence by Rebecca Ross goes on my Mount Rushmore. Memory card was full, had to take care of that, but just finished up giving you the review of Wild Reverence, which I loved. Then after that, I dove into Once and Again by Rebecca Searle. And I think Once and Again is going on the Mount Rushmore. This is another magical realism masterpiece in my book. Once and Again is about a family of magical women. The gift that women in this family have is that everyone in the family is able to travel back in time and reset events. However, they can only do this once in their lifetime. Once you go back and fix something, you can never change anything again going forward. So if you use your silver ticket when you're 14 to get back together with your high school boyfriend, you are at the mercy of the fates for the rest of your entire life. So this story follows our main character, who is now back in California living in her childhood home under the same roof as her mother and her grandmother. She's currently struggling in her long distance marriage, and in comes her high school love. So not only do we see her struggle to figure out what she wants to do with her marriage going forward, she also has a very challenging relationship with her mother, even though she has a really great relationship with her grandmother and her father. Her high school love interest is also going through a big family stressor that our main character feels very attached to because the families obviously grew up close together. And this one is definitely a tearjerker. It's another one with imperfect characters and imperfect ending, and even though I don't approve of a lot of what happens in this book, to me it's a 5-star read. I thought it was so excellently done. I think Rebecca Searle is such a talented writer, and I highly recommend everyone check this out. I think it's coming out in March or April of 2026. After Once and Again, I read Housemates by Emma Copley Eisenberg, which is going in Not Mad. This is a story about two creative queer women who go on a road trip across America. One person is the photographer, the other person is a compelling writer, and so they use these images to tell a story about the American landscape in suburban Pennsylvania in the post-2020 election world. Once they get back to Philadelphia, they put together this really mesmerizing art show. They have to navigate not only their romantic feelings for each other, they start out as housemates but become something more. They are romantic partners, but they're also creative colleagues. They have to navigate this newfound fame that they have. I really did enjoy seeing these two women take this road trip and just kind of explore small town life, highlight the stories of individual families and communities, and try to navigate their relationship when they got back. I kind of wish we got more of that, like how they navigated how their work was received, but overall, a really great read. After Housemates, I dove back into the Shepherd King duology and read Two Twisted Crowns by Rachel Gillig, which is going in I Love You. Or, you know what? I think this might be going on my Mount Rushmore. I really did love Two Twisted Crowns. At first, it was a little frustrating to me because where it picks up after book 1, we don't get a ton from our main character, Elsbeth. However, some of our side characters become very prominent in this story, and I just absolutely love them. It comes to a very high stress and perfect magical ending. I really appreciate when there is a time clock. So we have to unite all of these cards before midnight on the solstice. So as solstice comes closer, they are deep in this magical forest, they're fighting a bunch of monsters, they're getting cards here, cards there. They lose a lot of time in the forest on solstice, so you're worried the whole time that they won't get back to the castle and defeat the bad guy and unite the deck, and it was just spectacular. After Two Twisted Crowns, I read The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. Oh, I really loved that book. This follows our female main character who loves her family dearly, but man, is that a toxic environment. Her father was a prisoner of war in Vietnam, and when he comes home, he is very much not the same. He is not a kind man to our female main character or his wife. Despite this, they stick together and end up moving to Alaska, where they have been left a piece of property by one of the father's war buddies. So they move out to this desolate area in Alaska. They have to live off the land. They have no idea what they're doing, but thankfully the community really embraces them and teaches them how they catch fish, how they plant food, how they preserve foods through the winter, how to stay safe from the bears, etc., etc. So they move to Alaska, they're toiling the land, and then winter comes. And winter in Alaska is dark and cold and isolating and not a great place for a person who is trying to cope with a lot of trauma. So a lot of really bad things happen in this story. And so we see our female main character grow up in Alaska, navigating this really tough relationship, but also forming a very close friendship with the only other teenage boy in this space. Obviously a romance blooms, but it is just not so easy as they meet, they understand each other, they fall in love. There is so much going on in the town dynamics here. It was such a page turner and such a difficult read. And now as I'm thinking back, I feel like it has to go on the Mount Rushmore. Putting it in the I Love You category simply does not feel strong enough. This is a pretty dark read. I'm not sure I would recommend reading it in the depths of winter, but when the sun starts to come out for spring, I think you should read The Great Alone. After that, I picked up The Hounding by Zenobie Purvis, which I'm definitely putting in the not mad category. The premise of this book is absolutely hilarious. This is about a family of women who live on the English countryside. They keep to themselves. They're trying to just live their life. life. However, because this is, I think, the 1800s, and they are independent women, they sometimes go out into town without being accompanied by a man, everyone thinks that they are trouble. They're no good. People start rumors about them that they turn into dogs and are mauling other animals in the town, and people start to believe it. And honestly, by the end, I think by design of the narrative style, I start to wonder, wait, are they actually turning into dogs at night? Because some of this is sounding a little sus. I thought it was a delightful little story. It's a weird, quirky little book, and I'm super glad that I read it. I was on a mission this year to read the entirety of the Tolkien work, so I wanted to read The Hobbit, The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and Return of the King. I had this dream of doing a Hobbit girl fall, and my TBR just always gets away from me. But what I was able to do was read The Hobbit in December. It's not quite what I was expecting, but it was a nice, cozy little fantasy read. I am not mad that I read it. I'm actually quite glad that I read it, but I'm not sure I loved it. This is basically a series of short adventures that Bilbo Baggins and Gandalf have with the dwarves. They go on this larger mission to get this treasure out of a dragon cave, and along the way they encounter bad guys and magical creatures and Gollum, and they have to figure their way out of these sticky situations. It's very whimsical, it's lighthearted, you get to see into Hobbit culture, it's very cozy. I was really intimidated because when I tried to read The Fellowship of the Ring as a child, it was so difficult. The Hobbit is super easy, and now I feel primed for The Fellowship of the Ring. And lastly, we are ending 2025 with First Time Caller by B.K. Borison. I am torn on where to put this. I'm between soft pass and not mad. When I look at the other books in the not mad category, I like them more than I liked First Time Caller. So First Time Caller is going in the soft pass. This is a Sleepless in Seattle inspired romance about two people living in Baltimore. One is a radio talk show host, and the talk show centers around love. And then we have our first time caller into the show who gets kind of roped into calling in by her daughter. And Aiden, our talk show host, receives the call. It ends up that they have this great conversation about what it means to date in adulthood. And the viewers love their conversation so much that it boosts ratings to the point where they decide that Lucy needs to come on as a co-host. And so Lucy and Aiden are co-hosting the show. They develop a little flirtation. They start hooking up. And then it really dives into, can they be together long term? Is that what either of them want or need? And I found it entertaining enough to finish very quickly, but there wasn't a lot going on besides the romance. I just feel like there's so much more that could have been done here. I will also say I found this romance to be way too long. I think it was like 418 pages or something absurd. It was really long for a romance book that had nothing else going on besides will these people get together. I really did love the culmination of the story, you know, the grand gesture, the moment where the man realizes he's been wrong all along, he makes amends with family members, like all of that, like last 30 to 40 pages was phenomenal, but I'm not sure it justified the first 300 something pages I had to read to get there. And so while 2025 ended with a soft pass, I will say that overall this was an excellent reading year for me. I feel like I really honed into the type of stories that I like to read. I feel like I read a good mix of books that are very popular on the internet and then books that I just wanted to read on my own. And so I'm really hopeful that in 2026 we will find 100 more titles that I will love and put on my book Mount Rushmore. If you made it this far in the video, I cannot thank you enough for sitting here and listening to me yap about all of these books. I'm so curious to know if we had any similar takes on books. So if you loved some of the books I loved or hated some of the books I hated, please comment down below. And with that, I will see you guys in my next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.